The Answer.
48 at O'Hare, 49 Midway, 36 Aurora, 41 Joliet. Your next news update, 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So Tucker Carlson secured an interview with former crypto billionaire, FTX founder, SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, who is in, I think, year 3 of a 25-year prison term. He's at the MCC in Brooklyn. We found out during the interview that P. Diddy is treating him very nicely, so that's nice. That's good. He and P. Diddy are hanging.
Yeah, I don't think they're cellmates, but yes, they're both there. Yeah.
And on a more relevant note, given the crypto reserve that President Trump is standing up, here was Sam Bankman-Fried's perspective on the future of crypto, near term. You know, take it for what it's worth, but I mean, he is knowledgeable about the sector, regardless of what he has been convicted of doing at FTX.
You know, you look at what the Trump administration said, you know, going into office, there are a lot of good things. There are a lot of things that, you know, were very different from the stance that the Biden administration took, that you know, Gensler and the SEC took. Obviously, the follow-through is what matters. And that's the stage that we're at now, which is what will come of this. And I mean, not surprisingly, like, changing the guard helps, but financial regulators, they're big, giant bureaucracies in the federal government. They're not used to changing overnight. And they have been playing a really obstructive role for, you know, a decade in crypto. You know, the U.S., it's 30% of the world's finance. It's about 5% of the world's crypto. And the reason it's entirely regulatory, it's just the U.S. was unique in its difficulty to work with. So I think the big question is, will, you know, when rubber meets the road, like, will the administration do what needs to be done and figure out how to do it? Right now, crypto is not quite at a point where it could become an everyday tool of, you know, a quarter of the world or something. The tech isn't there yet, but it's not that far away. And if the industry keeps making progress rather than getting distracted too much by market prices, then, you know, 5-10 years from now, you could imagine a world where all of a sudden it is the case that anyone can have a crypto wallet, you know, a billion people could use it each day, with privacy, with security, fast, cheap, international, all the things that, you know, that was promised and that absolutely are distracted from by the latest meme coins.
For more on the tech and the future of crypto and money in general, commercial transactions, pleased to be joined again by Abe Froman. He's not just the Sausage King of Chicago, he's also the Director of Operations at Digital Asset Redemption. Abe, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I didn't know that I was going to get an SBF lead in here.
Yeah. Well, you know,
how we roll.
You never know what we're going to do to our guests. But anyway, but what about SBF? What about his sort of handle on where crypto is and where it could be in 5 or 10 years if I guess if the regulatory environment allows such development?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know me, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist myself. I don't ever want to use the word Bitcoin and crypto in the same paragraph or the same article, because I think that just exposes the human frailty that exists within the industry, and Sam Bankman-Fried is a great example of it. The fact that his mother isn't sharing a jail cell with him is astonishing to me, because she was kind of the mastermind behind it. So yeah, I was kind of surprised that Tucker gave him that that sounding board, because that's all it is when you get humans involved in trying to run systems, they will eventually corrupt the systems that they create, and that's what you can't do with Bitcoin. And I was actually very nervous, and I know I was talking to Quinn, your producer, last week about talking to you on Thursday, and I'm like, let's just have Friday happen and have the weekend get behind us, because I was concerned that Trump was going to do something Trumpian and just invite everybody to the party. And what he basically ended up doing was super, super simple and easy and not weird, which kind of surprised me.
Well,
I mean, a little nervous about Eric Trump surrounding himself with some ne'er-do-wells in the industry, and then Trump just comes out and says, "Hey, we're just going to move our Bitcoin that we currently have. We're going to move it into a reserve, and we may end up buying more in the future." But really, I mean, if you look at Bitcoin as being digital real estate, it's no different than what we've done, from buying Manhattan and buying the Louisiana Purchase, or buying everything west of the Rockies from Mexico, or buying Alaska from Russia. I mean, this is just an opportunity for the United States to make a digital land purchase. I think is a great analogy.
So so you weren't hoping that he would be more aggressive than just limiting this reserve to the Bitcoin that the federal government has, and what the federal government may seize in civil asset forfeiture proceedings, and auditing its stash at this point, and just holding it in reserve like it does gold or dollars. You think that is the right step to make with respect to Bitcoin and or crypto?
Yes, and because again, everything else that isn't Bitcoin is controlled by a small group of humans, and they're all corruptible. Even if their intentions are good, they're temporary. 50 years from now, they'll all be dead, and somebody else will be in control of the keyboard. So with Bitcoin, you don't have to worry about that, and that's the cleanest way to get something kicked off. And it makes sense. I mean, hopefully, I've been hoping for this for a long time, is that banks are going to start collateralizing Bitcoin much like you would your home equity, in order to be able to gain access to the equity of your Bitcoin without having to sell it and creating a taxable event. That's where the puck is going.
So that's what you're thinking about in the near term, as opposed to what you heard again from Sam Bankman-Fried, and we've heard from others, and this has been discussed since the outset, the idea of commercial transactions in Bitcoin, and the tech isn't there, but 5 to 10 years from now, if the regulatory environment provides for it, you could have 1 billion people transacting and doing commercial transactions in Bitcoin. Is that something that is realistic, do you think, and is it even desirable?
My thought is that government money is not going to go away in our lifetimes, and probably our children's lifetimes. So there's always going to be a function there to be able to make stuff happen. But the underpinning of the value on how that stuff transfers is going to be sitting on the Bitcoin network. Everything that people complain about, in terms of the speed or the efficiency of their expense, that's already been solved with the Lightning Network that sits on top of Bitcoin. So you can move hundreds of millions of dollars for pennies when you're timing it correctly. And the people who are in the know understand how to move value on the Bitcoin blockchain for pennies versus, the scary numbers that you hear from others.
Well, how many government? Oh, sorry. Go on. Well, I was just curious how many governments are developing their own digital currencies.
You know what? It doesn't matter. And I kind of remember, Dan, the conversation we had a number of years ago when, Zuckerberg was coming out with Libra coin for Facebook.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
And I was excited for that to happen because I knew it would be a disaster. And I wanted it to be a disaster because I wanted the disaster to be an education to everybody else around the fact that when you have humans and companies trying to control units of value, you're going to run into some massive issues. You know, the Chinese could just block Facebook, and they could confiscate all of your Facebook coin, or Libra coin, I think they were calling it at the time. So that's where, whenever you have a group of humans that are talking about creating something, you know that eventually it's going to fail.
Well, so
we see that.
Well, but so then, what's your vision for where the crypto sector goes? I mean, you heard Sam Bankman-Fried reference Gary Gensler. He's not the only one, and crypto's not the only industry. But talk just about the heavy hand of the SEC in terms of trying to launch crypto businesses. Is this going to be? Is the whole industry going to be Bitcoin or bust, or how do you see the industry itself developing?
I see the industry developing on top of Bitcoin. So you can program on top of it. It's cumbersome and it's clunky, and people can make fun of it all they want. There was a kernel of truth, though, that Sam Bankman-Fried mentioned, that the United States was absolutely inhospitable to Bitcoin in the early days because it's just human nature. You just see it as a threat to, the U.S. dollar. I think people have gotten over that. At least the Trump people have, and that's where kind of I could see that ending up. But there's absolutely no reason. I've spent 10 years trying to figure out what the utility of something other than Bitcoin is, and I still can't figure it out because nothing makes sense. And Sam Bankman-Fried is a perfect example of that, trying to monetize FTX down in the Bahamas. But so as long as the United States is probably going to look at it as being, hey, we need to be kind of the front runners on this, and as we typically are with most technology, and I see that happening here too.
And what's your message to those who are just sort of speculative investors, and buy Bitcoin or have a couple points in terms of their overall portfolio in Bitcoin, and don't really understand the underlying technology, the platform that you were talking about, don't really care that much, just see this as I said, a speculative investment? What's your message to them?
Well, I've always taken a look at the fact that, I live my life in dollars. I earn dollars. I pay my mortgage in dollars. I just look at it as like two rails on a railroad track so that you can jump back and forth whenever you please. But Bitcoin as being collateral and digital real estate is something that is the most compelling use case that I believe that exists. So, whether it's a tenth of a Bitcoin or a half of Bitcoin or a full Bitcoin, whatever it may be, you will be able to use that for utility in the future when it comes to, future generations. So I look at Bitcoin as being generational wealth, and that's kind of the beginning and end of it. And, whatever your investment, threshold is, there's a saying that we kind of have in the Bitcoin world is that short-term investment in Bitcoin is 4 years, a medium-term investment is 10 years, and the right investment is forever. So if you're willing to lock something away in your 401k for, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, why wouldn't you also be willing to lock something away in Bitcoin for the same timeline?
And and do you think David Sachs, Trump's cryptocurrency guy, and the Trump administration have that same perspective on Bitcoin and its development?
It seems to be, and that's where it was. I was kind of encouraged when he was kind of putting his team together and sending smoke signals as what last week was going to look like. So Howard Lutnick, they seem to have the right perspective. At least that's what they're saying so publicly. I mean, they're also both heavily invested personally, so you could look at it with a wink of cynicism and be like, oh, well, of course they're going to support something that they're part of. However, those guys are already billionaires. Like, they don't need any more billions. And so, so I kind of see that as being the team that he's got around him seems to be about the best team that you could possibly have considered Trump surrounding himself with. I had very low expectations going into the last week.
All right. Abe Froman, Director of Operations at Digital Asset Redemption. Abe, thank you as always. Appreciate your insights.
Yep.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
I should have done it sooner. Hi, Amy Jacobson here. And that's what a number of people say to me when they come up and talk to me about QC Kinetics. Why did I wait so long? So let me ask you a question to see if whether or not you're a good candidate for QC Kinetics. Do you have trouble sleeping, walking, day-to-day movement? Do you want to avoid surgery and all the pain, the long recovery, and the uncertainty that comes with it? Do you miss doing things like golfing, jogging, playing pickleball? Well, if you answered yes to any of these questions, I bet you're a great candidate. So please don't wait. Contact our good friends at QC Kinetics right now